Hello, and welcome to the 11th Annual Atlanta Creative Conference. My name is Martine. I am a filmmaker and a podcaster with a podcast called the Film Bug Podcast. It's a storytelling podcast, and in it, filmmakers get a chance to tell everything that happened on their set, from concept to distribution. They get the chance to tell you how they made their movies on a low to no budget. And in fact, I have some of those filmmakers with me today. I have Mr. Joe Doughrity, Ms. Seckeita Lewis, Mr. Josh Guffey, and Ms. Numa Perrier. How are you all holding up?
Good.
Thank you.
Good, hanging in there.
Yeah. Pandemic almost over, I guess. I don't know.
I don't know about that. It's a little more optimistic than 6 months ago.
Yeah, I'm holding out for some July barbecue. That's what I'm hoping.
There you go.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. So let's start with each one of you introducing yourselves and then telling us a little bit about the feature films we're going to be discussing today. Joe, let's start with Joe.
Hey, how you doing? My name is Joe Doughrity. I'm originally from Detroit, Michigan, but lived in Los Angeles for almost 30 years at this point. Recently relocated to Chicago, where I'm talking to you now. And I'm a writer, director, and producer, and best known probably for my longtime collaborations with John Singleton, where I worked with him on his Hood trilogy. And more recently, I made a film called Corner Store back in 2011, 2012. It had a limited theatrical release through AMC in Detroit and Atlanta on 4 screens. And it was made for a small budget, and we did some business against some pretty big competitors. And wow, it was the culmination of like all my filmmaking experience from a long time. And I'm here to tell you guys the good, the bad, and the ugly.
That's what we're hoping for, Seckeita.
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Seckeita Lewis, born and raised in Chicago, but now in Dallas, Texas. I've been in Dallas for over 20 years, I guess, at this point. And I'm going to talk about Jerico. So our film, Jerico, is about best friends going to work the morning of the signing of the Civil Rights Act and the calamity that ensues after that. That film was released in 2016 and finished in 2016, released in 2018. It was a Walmart and Best Buy DVD type of release and launch, as well as to streaming. So it was an Amazon 4-star film, then to Prime and streaming other sites.
Ms. Numa.
Hi, everyone. I'm Numa Perrier. I am Haitian American, raised in small town, USA, but I've lived my entire adult life in Los Angeles. So consider myself kind of a country girl, but a city slicker at the same time. I am very much an independent filmmaker. My feature film debut, Jezebel, is what we'll be talking about today. It was a 10-day shoot, and it's on Netflix now, and it was quite a journey going, from script to screen on that one, but I've been in the independent landscape from jump.
Josh.
Nice. So yeah, my name is Josh Guffey. I'm a writer, director, producer. I am originally from Iowa. I've also lived in Chicago for a time, and I lived in LA for a while, and now I'm in St. Louis. So here on my day job, I'm a commercial director at a production company, but then I just wrote and directed my first feature, which was a long time in the making. It took me 12 years to get it made. Some of my fault, some of luck and circumstance, but yeah, it was a journey, and it's called All Gone Wrong, and it's about undercover narcotics policing in a small town and how it's largely based on civil forfeiture, and there's some corruption, and really it's the story of one man who has to kind of make a moral decision about the work that he does. So and it's not yet released. It's we're in talks with kind of our dream distributor right now. So hopefully 2021 is our year. So
There's a lot of Chicago on this panel. I'm hearing a lot of Chicago. So each one of you, from what you've just said, you're writers and directors as well. Can we start with the writing? When you're writing your script, Did you keep a budget in mind, or did you already have your script and had to scale back to fit a certain budget?
For me, very much the conceit, the concept of my film Corner Store is, much like Kevin Smith's Clerks, it involves a store. So that kind of made it easy to keep, a finite number of locations. I think 60-something% of the thing is interior, exterior liquor store day. So definitely I thought about that in terms of writing, and keeping your locations down is an easy way to save money, but none of us want to keep our imaginations down. And I think you have to strike a balance between both.
Yeah, absolutely. For my film, my husband is my partner. And so he wrote the film, wrote the script for Jericho. And I don't think budget was on his mind at all when he was writing a period piece for us to do, not even thinking about all of the budget costs that go along with writing a film that's meant to be in a specific period. But, as the film started to come to life and we started to get closer to that starting gate of actually making the film, I think we had to make some choices, but, for the most part, a lot of what we were able to accomplish with the script was leveraging a lot of friends, family resources in order to make things work for the script as written for the most part.
Yeah, well, for Jezebel, well, whenever I'm writing, I'm always keeping production in mind. That's just a toggle of my brain that's just always activated. But for Jezebel, it really served the story as well to just have the two locations. There's an apartment location, and then there's a chat room office location. And the entire film is just going back and forth between those two realities and those two locations. So it worked for the script. I'm definitely always doing a little tug of war while I'm writing, and keeping that in mind.
Yeah, I mean, for me, honestly, like I said, I started writing this movie now 13 years ago. So I started writing it right out of school, and I didn't know any better. So I wasn't thinking about budget at all. I was just thinking about the story I wanted to tell. And so honestly, I think I've done a couple dozen drafts of it over the years, and each time it became a totally different movie with a different focus, but it was always sort of like the same lead character in the same world. But honestly, it was just because I wasn't very good, and I just I had to keep going, and I had to keep trying, and then as I developed, and I worked on more things, and I worked in the industry on the production side, and like commercials and reality TV and stuff. I started to understand all that stuff a lot more, and then in the last like 5 years, kind of being where I am professionally, those last couple drafts, I definitely I cut some stuff out because I couldn't buy it. So but overall, I think in other things that I've written, I try to like be in an open mode in writing, and just sort of like put it all out there, and try to like not give myself too many restrictions at that point, because it's paper, you can always cut stuff out, you can repurpose stuff. But I would say in a rewrite, of course, you just have to, and then if something's inspiring you, like a location or a character, or like or an actress that you might want to work with, sure, there's like that continuum, it's like what's going to cost me a boatload of money and what's not, and you just try to figure out where you want to pick your battles, because it's like the art of trade-offs. That's really what filmmaking has been for me.
Josh, can you give us a sense of what your budget is? And I know filmmakers sometimes are not comfortable saying the number. Yeah. I'm fine with the range, and I'd love to get an idea of what it costs to get the film in the can, and then the other stuff that comes after.
Right. Well, so I will say we're under the SAG ultra low. I mean, because we're sort of in those kind of conversations now. So I don't want to put a number on it, but
sure.
But say for production, we had a pretty rocky production history, because just to be super brief, we got cast attached. So Tony Todd, Candyman, is in our movie, and we got him attached. We had dates, and we were raising enough money for production, but then a group of people who were going to had verbally committed to us sort of pulled out 2 weeks before shooting. And so we had enough from a Kickstarter. I kind of scraped together what money I had, and then we had one more investor who was sort of who was out there, and we had barely enough money to shoot 5 days and keep the dates that we had with him, or else it was sort of a pay for play situation. This is my first movie, so like, you know, I'm like, is this normal? And I realized that like nothing's normal, like there is no normal. And so so we shot 5 days, and then but because of that, all the other cast like SAG cast that we couldn't shoot with, we had to go back to them and say, you know, we're not recasting the movie, but we need sort of some flexibility to raise the rest of the money for production, and then we'll shoot with you later. And we tried to do that directly with the talent, because if we went to SAG, I think SAG might have stepped in and been a bit kind of more forceful and sort of telling us how this was going to go. Like we maybe had to pay all that talent up front. And so luckily the one investor that we did have, he had come to set during those days, and we now got our quote unquote movie star in the can. So over the next 2 months, I think, so we shot in early June of 2019. And then we came back and shot the rest of the movie about 14 days in late August and September. So we were able to then sort of raise enough money just for production. So we were like kind of hand to mouth throughout this whole process. And then after that, we cut a trailer and did more fundraising for post. But it was definitely like, I mean, we never had all the money at any one time. I mean, it was only in little blocks, and luckily we didn't have to lose our dates with Tony, or else that would have been probably the end of the movie in that form, you know.
That's awesome. And you mentioned that it was a SAG ultra low budget contract, so people will get an idea of what your total budget was.
Right.
What about you, Numa?
To get our film in the can was about 85,000. And then by the time we went to premiere at South by and wanted to kind of clean up some of the post elements, you know, before a big premiere and bring on a publicist and get our team out to the festival, we ended up rounding out around 115. So low six figures, 10-day shoot. And that's how we got it done, and we cobbled it together.
Tell me a little bit about how you raised the money to make your movie, because I know there was maybe some crowdfunding, some personal investing. How were you able to get the money together?
Yeah, it was definitely a cobbling act, but I just kept the faith. I knew that we would find and get what we needed. My sister, who, you know, full circle story, you know, my film is about a true story between me and my sister. And she is the one who first approached me saying that she wanted to like do something creative with me. She wanted to produce something, really just give me money, you know? Like she had come into a little bit of money and she wanted to invest some of it in me. She had seen me hustling for so many years, you know, just doing so many different projects. And so, you know, she's never done anything in the film industry before. So my first question was, well, how much money? You know, because it's like when someone that's first going to go start investing and they're like, oh, I want to invest $10, you know, it's like, how much money are you really talking about? But it was a nice chunk of money. So like the first third of the budget came from my sister. She gave it to me piecemeal. It was so funny because, you know, I think once she committed to giving me like 25K, it became like an issue to just like give me all of the money. And I'm like, I need all of the money now so I can secure everything that needs to be secured. But she was like, no, I'm going to give you 5,000 this week. And I'm going to give you next 5,000 next Friday. And then even while we were filming in Las Vegas, we were going to, my producer can tell you, we were driving to Western Union in Las Vegas. And my sister was wiring me like thousands of dollars. It was such a Las Vegas story. So we were able to get the Las Vegas portion filmed with that piece, you know, with the money coming in, how it in the chunks it came in. So we did a week there, and then we returned to LA for the second location. 3 weeks later, we filmed that. I started a GoFundMe. So because I had filmed so much of the movie already, I had a lot of elements to share on GoFundMe. There was a lot of enthusiasm and excitement, like, oh my God, Numa is making a feature film. There was a lot of, excitement from friends, family, and supporters of my other work. So people really jumped in and got excited. I was able to raise another $25K on GoFundMe. Then I booked an acting job that was like a nice little chunk of money. It was like perfect timing.
Was it
when
Smith?
I got that check from that guest star, I got a guest star role on a Showtime series, and they paid me very well. And I was able to put some of that money into the movie. And then I think I circled back around to the GoFundMe again and asked everyone who had contributed, would they mind contributing again? I was like, we're almost there. And some did. You're only going to get a certain percentage that will go again with you, but some did. And then we got into South by Southwest, and I was able to go directly to people that gave me larger chunks of money. So it was, a year and a half of raising the money while making the film.
Yeah, and obviously this speaks to kind of building a community, whether it's, for the crowdfunding and being able to go back to those people to ask for more money, and then hopefully getting some money from them to make your project. And I know, Seckeita, there was a lot of that happening with your film, both in the fundraising and in the production of the film. So I'd love to hear a little bit about the fundraising. I know it was a family affair.
Process. It's definitely a process. I would say, it was a little bit of all of the above that Numa has spoken about already. We started off, this was our first film as well. So my husband and I were working full time, trying to raise the money, writing the script, like doing all of that, working full time. And then nights, weekends, vacations was all about making this film, which was our dream. And so our film ended up, being planned to shoot for 12 days. And we ended up needing 4 pickup days because we were shooting in May in Texas with a lot of outdoor scenes that had a lot of rain. Numa was there for most of that and got to experience that with us. And so we ended up spending a lot more than we had originally planned, right? We had a very modest, ultra low budget SAG film as well. That cost us a lot more. So our process kind of started first with us. I know lots of people will tell you don't put your own money into your film, but as a first-time filmmaker, it's like, who else is going to give us some money? So we felt like we had to prove it out in some ways, right? So we put a lot of our savings and from the day jobs, of what we were doing in order to make this film. We used that to make a short trailer, I guess 10-minute trailer of what the film would be like that we leveraged for our crowdfunding campaign. So we raised a good amount in crowdfunding, but still not enough to get us started. And so we then had friends and family that came on as investors, which it's always so hard, like trying to cobble all this money together. And then to your point, over time, you just keep putting more in. So you had your budget. And then, as things go, you kind of keep going. I think at one point when we were doing some of the pickups that we hadn't planned, we were like, okay, we're not going to make payroll for this week. Mom, dad, hey, how you, can you loan us a little bit more in order to get over the hump? So I think especially your first film, it is really a labor of love and people kind of pitching in. A lot of our film was shot out in East Texas, which is fairly rural, doesn't get a lot of film crews coming through. And so that was another place where we really just got a lot of support from people just wanting to see this film come to life that was going to highlight their area. And so even there, we were getting people saying like, oh, what do you need? We'll be there to help you. Like, well, you need a boat? Sure. We'll bring a boat to the lake so that you can get this one scene, things that may have been missed as we were planning the film. So it was a great journey and a great process, but it was a little of all of the above.
Can you give us a sense of your budget, even if it's a range, even versus where you landed once everything was done and in the hands?
We started off with a $60,000 budget, and we ballooned past that for sure, but still an ultra low budget film. But that's where we started, and very, very modest for a professional film. But we we stretched it a lot, especially for a period, time period film.
Yeah, and it was a period piece, and you have a lot of known actors in your film. So I'll get back to that later. And actually, Joe, you do as well. So Joe, tell us a little bit about your budget and how you got that together.
Well, my film was put in the can for $60,000 as well. And it came from primarily one investor, a local guy in Detroit who had won a big lawsuit. And, I've been hearing about this guy. And when I met him, he had just given a rapper $4 million and built him a home studio. But by the time we met, he said, "Hey man, all I got is 60 grand." And, I said, "Hey, I can do something with that." And we got it in the can for 60. And then, for various reasons, I had to take my film out of Detroit right after I shot it. And we'll talk about that later, I'm sure. And then the rest was a few tens of thousands of dollars in free labor, some of my money, and the whole thing was done for about $90,000.
That's fantastic. Can you give us the name of that person so we can tap it?
Out of money. He spent all the money.
Yeah.
Did you hear that part? It's done.
That's true. That's true.
His email.
It's over. It's over.
I think that's a good strategy, just like research who has won settlements recently and approach.
All the dentists were taken. All the dentists in Detroit were taken, And the crazy thing is, though, this guy didn't want a screen credit, didn't want a producer credit, whereas people who would go to contribute much less to the film were very, very, they weren't shy about asking for that stuff. So I'm in his debt, really, and I thank him for giving me a chance to finally make my own film as a director.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. So with budgets that are low, shoestring budgets, how were you all able to cast? I know, Joe, you had Judge Mathis in your film, Seckeita, you had a ton of known comedians and actors in your film. Numa, you cast yourself, which is another another layer of stress to, direct and produce and write and star in it. And then Josh, you had Tony Todd. So I'm really interested in how that worked out with your budgets and how you were able to approach, the people that you have in your films. Anyone can take this one.
I'll jump in it. Roger and I have worked together on Poetic Justice.
And Roger Guenver Smith.
Roger Guenver Smith, yeah. And I was just a big fan of Roger's from Do the Right Thing, Spike Lee's movie. It's, I love that performance. And I lived in Silver Lake, and I would see Roger all the time at the El Pollo Loco at Sunset. And then we had a lot, I found out in the Ralph's, the supermarket. So I was always seeing Roger. We had that experience of working on Poetic Justice together with, John Singleton. And he's such a great guy. And when he heard I was making a film, I originally wanted like Ernie Hudson, who's from Detroit, and some other people who Ernie was great in his not being able to do it. But Roger said, "Hey man, why didn't you ask me?" And I was like, "I didn't think I think I can afford you, Roger. We have no money." And Roger said, "Man, when do you need me?" And that was a saving grace. And he came out and very much, like Josh, he made it a real film, And Judge Mathis is another story because his son at the time was going to film school. And he said, when I was lucky enough to meet him at his community center in Detroit, he thought it was great what we were doing because we had a lot of out of work auto workers. We had a lot of interns, people who never worked on a movie. Meanwhile, Michael Bay and all these big filmmakers are in Detroit blowing up stuff, using it as a studio lot. And Judge Mathis, it came time for that awkward conversation. I was like, so will you work under the SAG low budget agreement, which is what we were also using, which is mostly $100 a day for most people. He said, "No, I'm not taking a penny. You're going to hire my son, and he's going to work on the film as a PA for a couple of weeks." And that was so much fun because Amir Mathis, his son, was a great guy, a passionate filmmaker. We treated him just like all the other PAs. He ate the free McDonald's breakfast, And the only funny thing about that is he would show up with these dope cars every day, and I'm in my mom's Honda making this movie, and he's in a Range Rover, Beamer, Mercedes. People are like, "Is that the director's car?" I'm like, "No, I'm using my mom's Honda." And I had a Honda in LA too, so I was Honda'd out. But, you do what you gotta do. This is all passion, and I sense that from this whole group.
That's fantastic. Seckeita, what about you?
Sure.
And
So
tell us who you have in your film as well.
sure. So again, my husband probably should be sitting next to me, but he's my partner. He is the title star of Jericho, and I have to credit him for having the forethought to try to put ourselves out there and see if folks would be interested to being part of the film. So we started with Irma P. Hall. So Irma P. Hall from Soul Food and countless other things. She's an amazing person, and she's based in Dallas. So we'd been to her theater. She is a co-founder of a local theater in Dallas. And so we'd seen her in plays. We'd been to the theater a bunch of times. So we started to semi-stalk her as far as like, she would be perfect as grandma. Like if we could just get her in this film. So we just hung around a lot and, brought our script and, and spoke with her, and eventually had the opportunity to get her to read the script and decide to come on board. But that was a long courting process of us just kind of like popping into to a play and seeing her. Really, our first was Greg Daniel. So Greg Daniel from True Blood was our first to sign on. And it really started with, an IMDb Pro account and a really honest email to him and a lot of other people saying, hey, we're first-time filmmakers. This is the script. This is the trailer that we shot of what we're trying to accomplish. We would love to have you in this role. This is our budget. We laid it all out there. And, we probably, my husband, Brandon, probably wrote 1,000 emails. I don't know. But, and most of them went unanswered. And then, I would say 10% came back as no's and a handful of people said yes. That includes George Wallace, so comedian George Wallace, Joe Marie Payton from Family Matters, and Greg Daniel. But the story for the person on this call, Miss Numa, was also one of our like highly sought after people. And so we had seen Numa, countless times in Black and Sexy TV. We'd seen her in The Couple. We're like, she's amazing, she's awesome. And we went to ABFF. Don't remember what year we were there, but I know that we were there and she was there, and she won an award that year, and we had the opportunity to meet her. And so Brandon, he's just someone he's just puts himself out there in a way that I can't. Like I've never been that person who's been able to network or just put himself out there, but he's just, able to do that. And so he stayed in touch and reached out to Numa, and she said, sure, I'll come on board. I like this character. So that was a blessing for us for sure.
That's one of my first film offers, and I had so much fun. And
Thank you.
Character ever, Sweet Georgia.
Sweet Georgia Perkins.
That's one of the things that I miss the most about film festivals. It's just meeting people, and then literally years later, there's the perfect opportunity for you to collaborate with that person. I really miss that camaraderie and new friendships. Hopefully we'll get back to that soon. Numa, tell us about your film. As I said, you are in yours, which
which did not add to the budget.
You didn't pay yourself?
I did, and, like in a small way. What was I going to say? So in the role that I'm playing, of course, I play my sister in the film, and I did have a list of actresses who I would have also loved to play my sister in the film. It was kind of a little bit of a conflict, but of course that for me, playing my sister, that's a dream role. If I had seen that role, come down through casting, with the description of my sister, I would have been like trying to kill people to get to it. I would have been trying to find the director, just like calling my agents and everything. You got to get me seen for this role. So, it wasn't a really super tough decision. I really wanted to play her. But I did have a few other actresses in mind, and budget was definitely other than me wanting to do it so passionately, budget was definitely a deterrent for me to even really start thinking in that way. Because I was thinking, okay, even if I do reach them, this is so micro budget, the conditions are going to be crazy. I just knew that I was working mostly with a team or actors I had worked with before, actors from my acting class, or a lot of the people that I cast in the movie. So we already spoke each other's language, and I just felt again, other than me wanting to play it, because that was really the main reason, no one else. So I really wanted someone else to play it. I probably would have just went for it anyways. But, you know, budget was a consideration, conditions or a consideration, not knowing that person and how they work. And, you know, we didn't have any trailers. We had a relief area, you know, and
We had a house around the corner, Numa.
yeah, I can imagine, you know, someone else playing Sabrina and someone else playing Tiffany, but not really, you know, Tiffany Tennille. I saw her in a short film, and she is just, you know, so stunning and such a spectacular actress with so much nuance and so much spectrum and range to what she can portray. She really had all the elements for me. So it's all emerging talents in my film. I consider myself still an emerging talent as far as being an actor. And that was the best thing for the budget for sure, but also the best thing for the film because there was already so much connectivity between everyone on set that we had that sense of family and intimacy that the film really needed.
Fantastic. Josh?
Yeah, I didn't play anybody in my movie, but my best friend when I was living in Chicago, I had always sort of thought he could be the lead. I actually met him on a set. He was acting in it. I was like PAing when I was first starting out. And I mean, God, so he kind of aged into the role. I mean, like I said, this took over 10 years to get into production. And so he just kind of like, I was like, dude, don't get old, just stay fit. Like we're gonna get it. We're gonna stay, like we're gonna get this made. And so I always knew I had him, and I was like, okay, he's not free, but he's gonna be staying in this room that I'm zooming in right now, so he can stay with me. He lives in Chicago, and so I knew that. And then, you know, for years, you know, you try to figure out how do you make this, and can we get somebody attached? What does that cost? You really don't know, and you're just trying to figure it out. And so I actually, through a friend, there was a producer that I had met who became a producer in our movie. His name's Frank Merle. And I had looked at his IMDb and I noticed that he had done a movie with Tony. And I just called him to ask him about him because I really, you know, once I had that like when I figured out, hey, maybe he could play this lead role, like this sort of lead bad guy, I was like, well, let's just talk to Frank and just see what's out there. And so he read the script and he was like, yeah, I'll send it to him, but I would like to produce. And you know, and that was a no-brainer for me. He was experienced. He had just gotten in the PGA, and I was like, sure. And then, you know, even when word came back that like Tony liked the script and wanted to do the movie, it was like, okay, great. We don't have any money. Like I hadn't raised any money at that point, and it was just like, you know, you just don't have resources, but you feel like you have momentum, but then you're like kind of still just like stuck in the same spot. So, you know, when we had done that Kickstarter, we set it for 30, and I don't know why, because it was like terrifying trying to get there. But 30 sounded like a good number going in, and then we end up getting there just by the skin of our teeth. And so once we had that, I was like, okay, well, I've got a little bit of money. And so we went back to Tony, and you know, you just it's literally like, what can you afford? And you know, when we actually had a casting director here in St. Louis who does a lot of commercials, and you know, a lot of Chicago TV, you know, they will shoot out all of the actors in Chicago and all those TV shows. So they'll come to St. Louis to cast a lot of the smaller roles for, you know, a lot of those network shows. And so she would help on that. And she had done casting for Up in the Air, the George Clooney movie that shot in St. Louis. And so her name is Joni Tackett. And I had worked with her a little bit on the commercial side. And so she helped me sort of just like put out a big call. And so we always had the idea of like, we could cast locally here in St. Louis, there's good people, but if we find people in say LA or New York or whatever who fit, and we can kind of figure out what the cost will be, we'll do it. And actually out of that casting call, there was a couple of actors out of LA that were sort of faces, you know, that I'd seen in other sort of cop crime movies that I was like, oh my God, like he's in that movie and I love that, and that's with my favorite director. And and then I had a call with a couple of people, and it just honestly it just became like, sorry man, I can't afford you, like like we don't have any money, so that was the mantra. It was like, and I'm pretty real about my movie. It's a cop crime movie, and so a lot of those sort of like arrows in the quiver of some like writer directors where you can say, hey, it's a passion project, and it was a passion project for me, and like it's personal to me in many ways, but I always knew that I was making like a genre movie. And so you really can't, like, if these are like working actors in LA who do a lot of movies and they have their rate, and you just can't be like, hey, help me out for my cop movie, like you can't do that in this case. Like you can't, and so and Tony was kind of the same way, but he was cool. He knew that he wasn't going to be, I mean, he's not a diva in any way. He knew what he was getting himself into, but he liked the part. And so it just became kind of like imposter syndrome, kind of faking it as you just kind of move forward, and you just keep giving yourself permission to ask the next question and try to get the next person, and just try to like tamp down all that self-doubt as you talk to these people who have made 100 more movies than you, and you try to sound like that you're gonna like be the leader on set that they need to do what they need to do.
Did anyone else have imposter syndrome?
Absolutely. I think I would say absolutely. I mean, from our first table read was a moment, I think, for all of us, of hearing all the words and seeing everything coming together, where you have that moment like, wow, this is going to happen. But then that first time on set, and especially, when you're directing Irma P. Hall and Jo Marie Payton and Greg Daniel all together in one scene, you're like, okay. Luckily, I think, and I've said this before, I think we were divinely ordered for those specific individuals to be in a room together, because they were the most gracious actors I could have had as a first-time director, to be like, okay, whatever you want, you got it, right? They were completely supportive. But I think through that process, there are times when, coming on set and it's a day that we have a lot of extras, and like, why? There were like there are like 80 people around me and they're all waiting for me to tell them what to do, is a little bit, daunting at times when you're a first-time filmmaker. And then, you work your way through it and you realize, okay, I should be here. But there are times when you when you first walk into it that you need to put on your armor a little bit, like, okay, this is something that I was made to do. And so I need to just go do it.
Joe and Numa, no?
Yeah, I mean, I've been on a lot of sets. I mean, but still, the irony is I had to prove myself more to the native Detroit people than I did to the people like Roger and the other two SAG actors I had, but I got through it. I mean, there were moments. I had a great support team, and people, like Dwight Patel, my first AD, who had a lot of credibility in the neighborhood that we shot in, because he played football for the Cougars, and everyone, he wears Cougars jersey, and that gets you instant respect in that neighborhood in 6 Mile. Miss Brenda Perriman, who unfortunately just passed of COVID, but she was this phenomenal teacher in Southfield, Michigan, and she was the teacher to people like Lawrence Lamont and some other people, Big Sean and people like this. So she brought a lot of credibility. I was just blessed to have a good team with me, and when the tough times came, I had people I could turn to.
Numa, you were a veteran, right? You had been.
Well, here's the thing. I don't believe in imposter syndrome.
Okay.
I don't believe in it. I have heard a lot about it, and kind of even almost thought, that applies to me in some way. But I don't think that it does. So I have a different perspective on it now. I think that it's just, if this is your first film, those are the normal feelings that you're going to have. That doesn't mean that you're an imposter, you're not supposed to be here, or, it's like that. I feel like that gets put on certain type of people. Women, Black people, other minorities, that's the question that gets asked, what about the imposter syndrome? Walk us through it. And I just think that it's normal feelings of like your creativity and the stress of making a film colliding, and that if it's your first film, of course, you're going to be nervous. Of course, you're going to have to deal with maybe being starstruck, the first time you work with someone that's been a hero of yours or that you've seen on TV a lot. But I try to peel myself away from.
Oh, I think she may have frozen. Numa, are you here?
Uh-oh.
Numa? Okay, we'll just wait for her to come back on. But Numa just mentioned sometimes what happens is your creativity and the stress of making a film, those two things colliding and while you're making your movie, that's what she experiences versus what you would call imposter syndrome. So I would love to know about while you are actually shooting your film and the conditions in which you are shooting and how that affects your process, because obviously you're trying to stretch a dollar and trying to create magic with very limited means. How does your budget affect your process while you're on set? Joe.
Well, obviously every day costs money. Like my film shot for 20 days. I think a few of you guys as well. So, if you have more days, you have more time. And, those big moments, I mean, there's definitely a couple scenes in my film I wish I had another day or half day to do. So it's there, but you can't let it be the driving thing. You have to, when you're working with a lot of first timers, and if they have access to the budget and they see how much you're spending on food and some items, and that's always a big thing. Why are you spending this on this? But at the end of the day, I think it's adversity and you get over it with a good team. And I hate that phrase fake it till you make it, because, fake it, I don't know what that is. You have to do hard work to learn this craft. But, like Ms. Numa said, sometimes you just plow through, I guess, she'll expound on it more. But that imposter syndrome is, everyone has those doubts. I know, I've worked with people who were way more experienced than me, but their first time in the saddle as a director, it was a different experience for them as it was in other capacities.
Josh?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think when I mentioned sort of imposter syndrome or sort of the fake it till you make it kind of thing, I think it's sort of an insecurity about, because that everybody on set is looking to you to sort of instill confidence. They want to know that like they're there for a reason, especially if you're working on independent film and people are there for free in some cases. And so it's like, I put a lot of pressure on myself to sort of like to be that MC, to like basically like, okay, this is how I can make it a good set, people can contribute, and we'll, and really when you talk about the budget constraints, I mean, I think for me, if I had to boil it down, it's like it's in the number of days. And so we had 19 days and we had probably as many, like double that number in terms of locations. So we're doing a lot of company moves and our movie is a crime thriller. So we're trying to hopscotch. We're trying to have that story accelerate. We're trying to have, here comes Numa again. And so really like, and so just to finish the thought real quick, like, ultimately what that means is like, you're like, okay, we will only be in this location for this half day and we don't have any money to come back. And we're shooting in a season where if we don't get it, we got to come back next year. And so that kind of pressure is sort of what I think the budget will do to you, is sort of like, we don't have a set at a studio where we can shoot year round. We're shooting at real locations. And then you realize, in some cases, I remember I just really I was kind of frustrated because I'm like, okay, I have 2 hours to shoot this scene. And like, we had some adversity that obviously everybody has, but for instance, we were shooting at like a recycling center, sort of like a trash, like almost like a landfill kind of place for the opening scene of the movie. And we had a half day set aside to shoot it. It's like a dialogue scene. And it was a company move. So we got there and there's a tornado that was going to be coming. And so we had 5 hours set aside. And so now I had 45 minutes to shoot that scene. And so, and then while we were shooting, you know, you can see in the distance, you can see the clouds coming. And then we got through 2 takes of, like, we did the wide, we got through 2 takes of one side. And then during the second take of our second person, and we're just doing like the full scene top to bottom because we don't have time to do, you know, hey, could you take that one thing back? You know, you can't do any of that. And so on the second person, the tornado sirens started going off during the second take. And I said, just keep going. Let's finish the scene. Cause it's like a 5-6 page dialogue scene. I was like, just keep going. If we have to loop it, that's great. We're not coming back here because we only got permission for this one day. And so we got the scene in and it's raining. It's starting to rain because the tornado's coming. So we have these 2 people kind of in a rainy spot in something where I wanted to like do a bunch of different, you know, types of performance because it's the opening scene of the movie. And I wanted to like have some options in the edit. Like, hey, what if we use this way that they played it or that way that they played it? But it became just a, you know, but honestly, like most of the movie end up being kind of like that. And I love that kind of, like you work that muscle on an independent movie to like walk into a spot and just, and the blocking gears are starting to like move in your head and you're starting to like really just get into the flow of things. And I loved that sort of adrenaline of just like, we only have this much time. We're all a well-oiled machine. And like, as the shoot got going, it becomes more like that. Everybody knows what their job is. And then you get to like, just do the work. And that's I miss that so much. I need to make another movie because I love that so much.
Joe, I want to come back to you just real quick because Josh just mentioned some of the challenges he encountered on set. And I know you encountered some challenges too when we're talking about, okay, we have a shoestring budget, we have a limited amount of time to shoot a film. You were shooting at an actual corner store. And there were times when you were shooting and customers were coming in to shop because it's a corner store and you couldn't just shut it down, right?
Yeah, he would give us limited amount of hours to shut it down, but you know, he had to run a business, and you know, it happened to be a Black-owned store, which the script is about a Black-owned store, but in Detroit, there's no way we thought we were going to find an actual Black-owned store because it's mostly Chaldean and Arab Americans. But we did find a store, and this brother Damon let us use it, but he couldn't give us, you know, he couldn't let us use it all day. So there would be, okay, Damon, for this, can you give us 2 hours or something like that? But it was a compromise. It was like that for most of the locations that we shot at, the Whitney, some of the Wayne State campus, but we made do with it, you know.
Awesome. And I think Numa's still having some technical difficulties that she's working on. So, well, Numa, actually, we can hear you now and we can see you. So we had moved on from, you know, the.
That's what I said. Broke my internet. Jesus came out like no.
So I know that with you, we left off talking about imposter syndrome, and you said how you don't believe in imposter syndrome, but you talked about how, you know, you're trying to be creative on set, but there's also the stress of making the movie, and those two can collide for sure. And that is your experience. And my follow-up question was, how was your process on set when all of that is colliding, when you're trying to be creative, but at the same time, you know that you have a limited budget, a shoestring budget, and you have to stretch it. How was your process affected? Did you become more creative? Obviously, you have to be more resourceful. How was that for you during Jezebel?
Well, I think no matter what your budget is, there's always going to be someone who feels like there's not enough money. There's always going to be something that's like, oh, we're stretching this. Once you start getting into, a $5 million film, a $20 million film, a $50 million film, even in a $100 million film, crazy big blockbuster, they never feel like they have enough. Right. There's always, something more spectacular that they want to do or reach for. So, for me, it all comes down to building your team. And that kind of ties in the imposter syndrome piece of it, that label that I don't want us to give ourselves. Instead, it's more of when you are building your experience and kind of building, stacking up the films that you're making and the projects that you're doing, it's all about the team that you're surrounding yourself with. If you're less experienced, then bring on people who are more experienced until you become the more experienced person. And that is really the first step in my process. And for Jezebel, I knew going in, I was like, okay, I know I'm so used to playing so many different roles. I'm going to be acting. I did the wardrobe design. I did the production design, all the things that you jump in and put your hands on as a director. Were also roles that I was fulfilling on a micro budget project. You may not be able to have all of those, heads of department. So it's about, with the team that you do have, making sure that they are the strongest players that can support the vision that you're doing in whatever parameters those are. So I knew going into Jezebel that I needed my right-hand producer. I knew I wanted it to be led by Black women. I knew I needed people there that I could trust, because my daughter was going to be on set acting in the film, but also she can't be around for most of the scenes that we're shooting. So who's my person, that's helping with that, all of those things, really being very strategic about each person that we did have. And it was skeleton, but each person was really hand selected by me based on their skill set, their get up and go, their understanding of their story, and their support of me and what I was trying to do. And as I move into the bigger budgets and working with brand new people and actually having departments to sit down and have meetings with, I still carrying that same philosophy into every meeting that I'm having. Oh, I'm sitting down with this person, how aligned are they with the vision? Are we vibing? Are they more experienced than me? Plus, that's a plus, going into, directing a studio feature. Now, so I'm still apply the independent filmmaker mindset. And instead of wanting to unpack what imposter syndrome looks like, I'm more interested in how can I collaborate with more experienced people that I can learn from in the process, and then be that person for the next person.
Right. But once you move into the bigger budgets, then certain things become easier, right? Like you can have a tech scout, you can, take a couple of days to go look at the location, and you can choose the type of gear that you really want. Did you have to compromise on stuff like that? Like, for tech scouts, for instance, sometimes they want you to book the location for an additional day so you can go and take a look at it. And, sometimes gear can be pricey. Did you have to make any compromises?
I did. There were 2 locations in my script. I had a hospital scene and I had a funeral scene that we actually needed locations for. And I had been scouting and trying to find, well, maybe we can do the funeral in a church. Maybe I can make a donation to a church and they'll let us come film this funeral scene for a day. But the churches that I reached out to, like one of them wrote me back, I saved this email. They're like, the Lord said that we cannot do this for this price. I had offered some like very meager offering, and they're like, we prayed on it and the Lord said, that no, you got to add a 0 to this, young filmmaker. So that was like, I kept scrambling going, well, how else could we do a funeral scene? Could we do it outside? What if we go to the park and the park looks like a cemetery? That is that like micro budget thinking mind, but it applies to the higher budgets too, because they're always trying to take money away from you when you have more producers and the studio and everything. Like that money, that 10, 20, whatever $1 million to them is the same as your 60,000 that it's the same money, and that's like, when I get asked that in interviews, like, how are you gonna, make the jump from this, small movie you did to this bigger movie? I'm like, it's the same thing, that's why I tell them in the room, I said, it's the same thing, it's the same money, it's all the same. So yeah, I had to sacrifice. So then I looked into the script, also the hospital scene. Getting a hospital is near frigging impossible when you don't have money. And there are the sets out here in LA, that they have the whole setup, but I ran into a lot of, money obstacles with that. It was like, oh, it's not just renting it for the day. That's a chunk of money that I could figure out. But now, like, they're hitting me with all the extras, the insurance, and like, my kid's going to be on set. They're not okay with that. I have to pay extra for her and have like a tutor for her just to even be there. And all of those things that you have to, child labor obviously is important. But so I had to really look and go, do I need a hospital scene? Do I need a funeral scene? And it ended up really serving the script. And I really try to tell myself that when I am hitting up against an obstacle, that it's the script speaking to me, saying, actually, maybe you don't need those scenes, and every coming of age film has a hospital scene and a funeral scene, one or the other, because it's usually like a parental figure that dies. That's part of the coming of age, So my film definitely had that. The mother dies and then she's coming of age. So showing that hospital scene, the more I thought about it, and it took a few weeks of really thinking it through, I said, I'm going to drop the scene entirely. Not just because of the budget, but to give my mother the dignity of her last days, of not replicating that moment. So that was one thing that I was like, oh, I feel like the script is speaking to me. And with the funeral, I really hated to have to let go of that scene, but I realized we had all of this beautiful footage of us on the bus, dressed in all black, going to the funeral. And I said, well, that's more powerful than even seeing the funeral and seeing the speech that you always see in a funeral scene. It's more powerful just seeing the silence of this family that has to take public transportation to their mother's funeral. And I used that as the funeral scene instead. So I applied my creativity, my imagination, but it was also angels. I was calling on my angels and my ancestors to speak to me through the script. And I realized that sometimes they're speaking through those roadblocks. At least, that's my approach. That's like my spiritual approach to the filmmaking, is to let it speak to you. And a barrier is a blessing.
What about you, Seckeita? Were there scenes that you just had to eliminate?
Yes, absolutely. I think, as you talk about creativity and stress, and I think it all comes down to that adaptability and being able to, make that turn on the fly sometimes when you have to. Going into the project, we were feeling pretty good, like planned, and then like that first week of shooting were all mostly indoor scenes. And then we did, and they were, paper mill, juke joint, like multiple different locations. But then we had the company move to East Texas, which was a couple hours away, everything different there. And almost all of that part of the film was outdoor in May, that we thought was May's good, right? Good solid weather patterns, not so much. And so as it started to rain basically every day, that we got out there for all of these great outdoor scenes, it was like, you could see dollar signs falling from the sky, right? You're sitting inside, like waiting to like, oh, okay. And being like running out there, get the shot. It starts raining again. We got to bring some things inside and kind of like trying to cover cameras and, all that kind of stuff. And so we fell behind and we had to make those calls of, okay, do we really need this scene? No, we really don't. It was a nice to have. We don't need that. Or, while it was raining, like, what can we capture in here? We didn't think of that scene as an indoor scene, but maybe now it should be an indoor scene. Like, these conversations can happen in different places. So, making those switches. And then, the final scene, brought us back to Dallas, and it's the climax of the film. It's the one scene that we kind of had to have because it is the climax of the film. And it's a scene where our actors, so George Wallace and I think Joe Marie Payton, both of them, their flights were the next day. So they were wrapped. This was the last day of their shooting. And on that day, same thing, we're at the paper mill and it rains, and we just need to get, that final speech, right? That comes from these three people. We have to get that. And so it became that became the priority, and all of the other things that needed to happen at that place. We thought we can come back and do this with our local actors. We have to get these folks in the can before they have to leave. And honestly, like, I would go check on my actors, and Miss Payton and Miss Hall, like, baby, we just praying that the rain stops so you can get this, get this one scene. And so to your point, I had to get creative with how we shot it. If you watch the movie, you'll see us shooting in one direction in order to capture that moment with all of the churchgoers are behind them for this scene. And we shot that scene on that day. From the grace of God, the rain stopped long enough for Miss Hall to get through her speech once. We thought about taking another take, and the rain started. I'm like, oh, okay, we're done. That's the end of today. But we had to come back, like a week later in order to get the other side of what was happening in that moment. And so that scene is kind of sewn together. Hopefully when you watch it, it's not something that's clearly apparent, but we shot that. You'll see the reactions of her speech are from people who weren't there when she was given it, or people that we had to bring back because she wasn't there when we captured that second side of it. So I think you just have to be adaptable and kind of roll with it. And you look back on it and you're like, well, that was fun. That was not something that you expected to have to do and try to figure out, but it happened, and you feel like a stronger filmmaker for it when you think about, okay, the next projects, the next things that you do. Like, again, I said, this was my first film, but this was an education in film through doing. The action of doing it was so beneficial that, like Josh said, I'm like, okay, I'm ready to do it again. Like, I want to get out and do something else.
Seckeita, you just mentioned watching dollar signs fall from the sky.
Yes.
So I'll start with Joe. If you can tell us, what was the most unexpected cost for you?
Wow. They all had their challenges. Thankfully we didn't spend, because we only had 3 SAG actors, we didn't spend a lot in travel. We used a lot of local actors. Detroit's comedy scene, Lawrence Lamont brought a lot of stand-up comedians, Bill Hill, Martine Harris. I'd known Mike Bonner because he was pretty prominent with the Def Jam and kind of Detroit scene. And every time he'd come to LA, I'd go see him at the Comedy Store or something. I'd say, man, Mike, we got to make a movie. We got to make a movie one day. And it just seemed like, this is 10 years, much like Josh's experience. And that day just seemed to never come. And finally, it did. And we pulled it together. So, I think travel wasn't the biggest expense. It was, a lot of it was I don't know. I knew it was going to be expensive. Food was expensive. Everything was a challenge. I'll go with equipment because that's where I had to make some compromises. But that's also where you fall back on your team. Much like Seckeita, one of my actors, Roger was only there for 5 days, but we had 2 red cameras. And what I had to do is have my first AD, my buddy Dwight, who I met on Poetic Justice. He was the craft service guy, but he went on and directed 20, 30 music videos. He made a thing with Dr. Dre, this $11 million thing, 11 Hour of Chaos. So I knew his capabilities. And one night we got together to shoot, and he said, Joe, you need to let me direct these 2 scenes. And I'm like, but this is my name. My name's on this film. I got real emotional about it. But one of them was an MOS scene, that was part of a montage. And the other was a dialogue scene. But this was my brother who I'd known for 15 years. And we had these 2 cameras on limited days. And I had to get over my ego. And I said, all right, Dwight, do it. And the next day we split the crew up. And Dwight went and did these 2 moments, and I got another day to work with Roger, and the film wouldn't have been made without that. So falling back on your team again.
That's awesome. What about you, Josh? Unexpected costs?
Yeah, so we have some action in the movie, and I did not want to. So there's a couple of scenes with gunfire and stuff like that, and so I had a real allergy to sort of the kind of and you can do it well, and I know visual effects artists will sort of talk you down from this, but like I didn't want actors running around the scene like just kind of like, you know, moving their hand around and just looking silly. And so we hired an armorer for the movie with you know, and they're probably the highest paid person on set. And you know, the thing is, there's no licensed armorers in Missouri even, and or St. Louis. And so for the first leg, that 5 days that I talked about, we used, because so over the years we had shot some proof of concept stuff, and I had used an armor in LA like many years before in like 2011 for some footage. And so we actually brought that person over, and you know, my line producer is like, dude, you know, all the, like, there are so many things that we're not going to be able to do now because you want this. And you're just like, yeah, but this is sort of what I'm thinking of, you know. And so that went really well, but it was really expensive. And then we were able to get another armor from I think it was from the South. I think he came up from Alabama, and he had done some work on Stranger Things and stuff like that, and as a husband and wife team. And but you know, you pay per round. I mean, you know, if you do a lot of takes, you know, you're spending a lot of money. And then you walk around the set, and you see all those spent shell casings, and you're just sort of like seeing those dollar signs in your head, you know. And but you know, with that said, I mean, we had a lot of actors who just had not done that kind of acting before, just like being in an action scene. And so I don't want them trying to pull like their blue steel face and looking cool. Like, I need them to actually respond to what's happening in the moment. And like, you know, that shit is loud. I mean, and it is, I mean, it's real full load blank gunfire. And you know, and speaking to that, and this is why I think it was money well spent. You know, I actually told this on your podcast, Martine. We had a house shootout, and the actor that we had, it was just a day player. He was coming in to play somebody who was going to be kind of one of the bad guys, and he showed up to set drunk. And so we had a little powwow, you know, the AD, myself, the producers, and the armor, and we were like, we can't let this guy handle any weapons. What are we going to do? Do we cut the part? Do we, you know? And then the armor's like, dude, I'll do it. And I'm like, okay, great. And you know, so now I don't need to coach this guy through it. He's like, dude, he's on it, you know.
Might even give you a couple free extra takes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and what's so funny is he actually didn't. So all right, so let me retell this real quick. He actually didn't volunteer right there, but his wife, who's sort of his assistant, she comes up to me after this little powwow, like, what are we gonna do? And she goes, he would love to do it. You should just ask him. And I was like, okay, all right. So I was like, hey, would you like to play it? And he's trying to play it cool. And then like he says yes. And then during the shoot, she's kind of by monitor. I just had a little tiny sort of like 4-inch kind of remote monitor. I didn't want a video village or anything. We couldn't afford it, and I don't want people looking over my shoulder anyways. But she's with me, and she's like, he is having the best time, you know, and like, and she's like, he's gonna put this on his IMDb like tonight. And I was like, okay. And so yeah, we spent a little bit of money, but we got him out of it, and we got and you know, everybody is just you know, it makes people, it's almost like stories I hear about when people would shoot on film, how there's like okay, film's running through the camera, every take is like a play, like we have to just like, everybody's got to get up for it. And so when you're shooting with blanks, everybody's got to get up for it, because there's a lot of safety precautions, and you can't just like, even on digital, you just can't like shoot and shoot and shoot. It's like, it's very like, this is exactly what we're going to do. You're going to shoot this many times, you're going to shoot this many times. And it's like, this is the only thing we're going to do in this take, because if we go outside of that, it could be unsafe and someone's going to get hurt possibly. And so you have to be very like, this is all we're going to do in this shot. And everybody's, you know, the AD would be like, quiet on set. And, you know, you're just like, it's like, you have like that silence before the take, and then you do it, and then everyone's ears are ringing afterward. but like it just creates this like gravity, and everybody on set kind of feels that. And then you look at the footage and you see all the actors just kind of like they're in the middle of it too, and without that, you do just have to lean on visual effects, and it just doesn't give you the same thing. Because our movie, there's different types of movies like this. There's ones that treat the violence in a certain sort of like it's for the genre thrills of it, it's the action of it. But then there's others that, which is what we were trying to do, which is sort of like we're telling a drama that has violence in it, and so you need these people to be real people in these situations. And so that's one of the other reasons why I really needed to push for that. And yeah, we just had to have pizzas sometimes, and not the nice crafty, so.
What about you, Seckeita? Biggest or unexpected costs?
Yeah, I think, when it comes to special effects, we expected it, but I don't think we realized how much it would cost to have a stuntman on set for some of the fight scenes and some of the falls, as well as a special effects person for some of the gunplay. And we also, there is a lynching scene and a cross burning scene in our film. So, to your point, Josh, around the gravity of those scenes, but then also on top of what you're capturing, so the gravity of just being in that moment and experiencing it, but also the gravity of okay, we have one cross, right? I can burn this cross once. If we don't get it, I don't know what we're gonna do, right? There's no take two for this scene. So some of that, you feel like you do have to make the investment to have that person on set to make sure that everyone's safe. But the most unexpected cost, I would say, was after. So in post-production, visual effects, because we didn't write a script that should have required any visual effects. But at the end of it, when we started looking at the footage, we found things that we'd missed that, wouldn't have been in a period piece, right? A modern thermostat in the corner, flat screen TVs in the back of the juke joint that weren't covered. And so things like that literally had to be wiped away. And so that's where, again, friends and family and having a community of people who wanted you to succeed came into play. We were able to find my husband's best friend's brother is in the industry and is a visual effects artist, and so was able to help us clean up some of the stuff that we had missed, but things that we had completely not budgeted or expected to have to need, even like a modern car in the middle of all of our 1960s prep things. So there were a few things that we missed that had to be cleaned up on the back end.
Numa?
Yes, so insurance, I would say, was the first like big unexpected price tag. Yeah, we were lent a camera from Canon, a great camera, but we still had to insure it. So that mixed with having to insure like all of the equipment because we were taking it from LA to Las Vegas, was a big price tag, an unexpected price tag. So that was the first one. And then the other unexpected expense was how expensive coloring the film would be. The quotes that came back from that, we had to find a way. But now I know.
Yeah, and both Seckeita and Numa, you mentioned the unexpected cost that came in during your post-production. I know that for a lot of newer filmmakers, if it's their first feature, what we tend not to keep in mind is delivery, the cost of delivering your film once it's all done. And I want to know about that, because I remember for me, the first time I heard about, you have to do the closed captioning, you have to deliver the sound and whatever. And I was just like, and you just see the dollar signs. And so were those costs unexpected for you? Did you budget for them? Or were they a surprise? I know, Josh, you're in the process right now, but Numa, you've already delivered your film to
yeah. Well, I had some heads up on it from talking to other filmmaker friends, like, hey, get ready for this. It's going to be a lot. It's not just a lot financially to deliver your film. It's a lot of, tedious paperwork that if you don't have that lined up from the very beginning, like that's another thing I think in the indie space is like really having indie producers who really love producing and who will get into the minutia of all of the paperwork and make sure that those ducks are in a row. We don't always have that type of producing partner on an indie film. So you end up as a director / producer having to catch up with all that when it comes time to deliver to a distributor. So I had a little bit of heads up about like the E&O, which is, the errors and omission insurance that you need to deliver. I was able to work that into my distribution deal. So I didn't come out of pocket for it. The distributor did. But, that's something that if you don't know to even ask for that, you're just being asked to go handle it. And that can cost you from $3,000 up to maybe 10, depending on where you go and what is all in your film. So and you cannot go to broadcast without it. So that's important. The closed captioning was a little more of a surprise. I had the heads up on the E&O, but the closed captioning, I didn't realize, and I hate that I had that element of ignorance, but I definitely don't now. I did that by hand. So there's, because I didn't, in all of the like, when your film goes to a distributor, they'll give you a sheet, many sheets of what you need to deliver. And so I had like printed it out and was crossing things off, but somehow I missed that, and that's where like a great producer comes in because they help make sure that that's all like in line. So I got a phone call from someone at the distribution team saying, hey, we don't have this file. And I'm like, what file? And so then I'm calling my post-production supervisor, who's so amazing and saved me so many times. I said, oh my God, I don't have this file with the subtitles. And I have to turn it in by I had like 2 days. They're like, oh, the deadline's Friday, or we're going to lose our date. It probably wasn't, but that's what they had to tell me to put the fire under my ass. So my post-production supervisor was like, go to this site. This site will transcribe your film. And then you have to go in and by hand, it's gonna have a lot of errors. So you're gonna have to go in. So I was, I did that. It didn't cost too much, but I had to go through every line of my script and make sure that it was correct. And most of it wasn't, it was like half and half. So I saved money. I could have given that to a company to do it. But that was an unexpected expense, an unexpected deadline. And so I just had to do it myself, so now it's all good. But yeah, delivery, there's all type of things. Festival submissions really rack up. And then when you get into a festival, especially if you get into one of the larger festivals and you want to cut through the noise, you need a great publicist. So that's another $5,000 that you should plan on spending on your film. But I really tried to look at making my movie as going on like a treacherous hike. Like I only want to I can't look all the way up, I just, okay, we're going to get to this plateau and walk for a bit. Then we're going to go up again. And that's how I got my film done. There was no way that I could have just looked all the way to the end and I would have been too overwhelmed.
Yeah. Seckeita, what about you in delivery? I know that there, just like Numa, there are certain things that you had to take ownership of and do yourself.
Yeah. Numa, your story makes me laugh because for our subtitles in French, which I took one semester of French, but I don't know French. And so when we got the ones back in French, and our premiere for our film was at the Pan-African International Film Festival, Pan-African Festival that's in Cannes. And so it screened in French, and it was probably wrong then. But by the time that it came to deliverables, we had to do the subtitles in English and in French. And so going into that file and moving things, like getting it lined up, marrying it all back, rendering it back out, looking at it and going, nope, it's off still a little bit. And like doing that a few times was definitely an education. The other thing that was kind of a surprise for us when we got there was just like little things that were like adding the distributors, logos to the front and back and things like that. And our editor it was too expensive for us to go back to our editor to do some of those things. So that was when, again, we were like, okay, well, we can figure this out, right? So I had to figure that out. Like, how do you get back in there? So I'm a much better editor than I was when I started the process, out of necessity, just because, to your point, you're out of money and you just got to figure out how to get it done.
And Josh, you're kind of in the thick of it right now.
Yeah, I mean, luckily, so the way, so like, you know, I mentioned early days, like when we had that one investor who stuck by us, that investor, I found that person through another feature film that had shot in St. Louis just before ours. And, you know, that was how I actually found some investors, is I looked at all the movies that had kind of shot in and around the area, and I looked at all the EP credits, and I just sort of tracked them down on LinkedIn, and I just was very upfront. I was like, this is who I am, this is what I'm doing, and I see that you were involved in this movie. Are you interested? And so long story short, he had this experience as an investor on that movie, and he liked that experience. And so when he invested in our movie, he became a full producer because he was trying to get into filmmaking in that way and become a producer. And so he you know, has, he basically, since he's like kind of the money guy and he wants to produce, it's like, yo, dude, that's your gig. All right, like this is gonna be you. Like, you can pay somebody and that's on you, or you know, we can figure it out and go from there. So that's kind of our game plan right now, and I'm sure I'm gonna have to, you know, do multiple renders and line things up and all those kinds of things. But like, you know, and then, you know, there was another sort of more day-to-day producer on that other movie who's been nothing but just gracious and helpful to us. And, you know, he figured out how to create his own DCP and, you know, all these kinds of like other things that he had talked to us about. And so I know it's coming. I'm in that like blissful ignorance mode right now, so please don't sort of kill my buzz. And, you know, we'll go from there.
What about you, Joe?
Well, you know, it's weird. Both Josh and Numa just triggered me with the DCP file. Okay, the DCP file. You get these victories, right? So we had our film premiere at the Pan African. We had this strategy with Seattle Black and Atlanta and Gary and all these great, you know, Black festivals. And then AMC calls and says, hey, we want to put your film in theaters. And that's a victory, right? You're all excited. And then I had, you know, if I needed a DVD made, if I needed, because I'd worked in post, I could get you Digibeta, I can get you all these formats. What the heck is a DCP? And then they want $12,000 for me to give it to them. And luckily I found a guy who made it for $5,000 independently. And I was scared of, like, because I didn't want him to do it wrong and it ended up costing me more. But all of a sudden we had to deliver this DCP thing. That's what the theaters use. I mean, I thought I knew all the formats from all these film festivals, DCP. So I guess the big tip is contingency. Whatever your budget is, put a little contingency in it because you're going to need that money. You don't want to turn a victory into a failure.
Teacher cannot talk. And for me, this also really speaks to what I was saying before about your team and having people more experienced around you. I'm so fortunate that I have a great post-production supervisor who also edits, who knows how to make DCPs. He made my DCP. That was like part of the package. He made my DCP for me when there was technical difficulties at different festivals for reasons I could not understand. He would get on the phone with the festival programmer and you know, retool it for, you know, London where they have, their equipment is different, you know, and he would be able to just go in and handle all of the tech stuff that I needed. And if I didn't have him on my team, I would have lost out in so many ways and, you know, probably had an even more ballooned budget. So really thankful for that. But just having the foresight to, you know, have a strong post-production person, have a strong person who knows all of those aspects. If you don't know how to make a DCP, get someone on your team who does, and also work on making those type of relationships too. It's not just about making the relationships that are going to get the thing in the can for you, but having great relationships with post houses and, great sound, those relationships, those people that really want to come through for you, at that final hour when you're like, I hear a buzz in my film and I need someone to take this out, it's really, really important.
Numa, because like the guy, Scott Jennings is the guy who did my sound mix. He also did The Help. And The Help came out the same day as Corner Store. Now The Help is in 3,000 theaters. The Corner Store is in 2. And he's all on the Facebook talking about my movie. And I was just like, oh, that's a great feeling, because The Help didn't need no help. The Corner Store did.
Okay.
And then I'm able to, now that I'm hopefully getting close to handling these larger budgets, there's nobody I'm going to go to other than Scott Jennings for my post audio.
Right. Yep.
And we're almost out of time, but you each kind of touched on it a little bit in terms of advice. What is the single best advice that you were given that you can pass on to someone embarking on that journey? And then also drop your social media handles, websites, etc. Whoever wants to start.
Okay, I have one. I always say, because I love it so much, is shoot the rehearsal.
Yes, that's a great one.
Just
all right.
Just shoot it. Just roll. Just be rolling. Always be rolling. I'll modify it to my advice. Always be rolling. It's the worst when you're like, okay, we're just gonna do a little light rehearsal for blocking, and your actors are like, yeah, it's just a light rehearsal for blocking, but then they actually do something amazing and you weren't rolling, and you could have at least got some of that. Yeah, just shoot. Always be rolling. And my social media is Miss Numa on Twitter and Instagram, and House of Numa is my site where you can see all my early work and learn about what house I'm building over there.
And what do you have coming up?
I'm doing my first studio film for Netflix. That's filming this summer. A lovely, messy love story rom-com with Gabrielle.
We love messy rom-coms. We love them.
Good messy rom-com. I'm excited. So we film in New York this summer.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And Seckeita, best advice.
I would say a couple of things. One is I've often been told if it was easy, everyone would do it. And so it's not an easy business. And so you just got to keep going, keep pushing if it's what you love and you really want to do it. And secondly, it would be just do it. I think, our first film, we were naive enough to make our first film. I think if we had thought a little bit more, we probably wouldn't have just jumped into making a period piece. But I love the experience, and I would do it again. So I would say to people who are kind of thinking about it and they're scared, just pick up a camera and start doing something, and it'll continue to grow and you'll get better and better as you go. Would be my two things. And then I would say, so Lewis Taylor Productions, LEWIS, Lewis. Lewis Taylor Productions is .com is our website. I'm Seckeita Taylor Lewis on Facebook or Twitter, or Lewis Taylor Productions in most of those places. And then the next project we're working on is a story that my husband and I co-wrote, and it's a story about a man diagnosed with type 2 diabetes and follows his journey to change and save his life, inspired by my husband's personal story with diabetes. And so we are in that development phase. As I've heard before, if you're always looking for investors and dollars to help make the film, but if you can't make the $1 million budget, if you can't make the $200,000 budget, maybe make the $60,000 budget, I think that these filmmakers here would say, just make the film. And so that's what we're working on now, just making the film and moving forward with that.
Fantastic. And Josh?
Yeah, so where I work now, the company's called Vidzu Media, and my boss, John Lanius, is he said one of these Forrest Gump kind of lives, and he basically told me, trust your gut no matter what. And you know, it really is true, because, you know, like I said, with the journey for this movie, I didn't know about budget making. I didn't know about screenwriting. I didn't know about getting cast and stuff. But like, there's going to be some snake oil salesmen that are going to come to you, and you know, especially now where we're done with the movie and we're trying to look for distribution, and we're in a nice conversation now. But if you feel like something's not right for your movie, then trust it. If you feel like a take wasn't the right one, try another one. And so just trust your gut no matter what, in sort of all settings, because if you don't believe in that, then there's really no compass. And so that's what I would say. You can find me, so my website is joshguffey.com, and same with my Instagram, Josh Guffey, last name Guffey. And I'm on Twitter at Josh A. Guffey. They don't let you go Josh Guffey on Twitter, I guess. But yeah, that's me. But yeah, this has been an amazing experience. I loved hearing about everybody's movies and their experience. It's cool how we all made vastly different movies, and there's just sort of a common experience to filmmaking, you know.
Joe?
My biggest advice would be to get someone to handle media management for your film, because we lost a couple of scenes. If you can't afford a DIT, get a camera PA or have your second AC or somebody, because it was, you know, we did lose a scene because of bad media management. And that was heartbreaking to me, because everybody worked, you know, really hard on it. So I'd say make sure you have that covered. You can find me on Twitter, usually at Jody Filmmaker. My website's www.showtownpictures.com. That's Showtown, SHOTOWN, no W. And my newest project I'm working on is a film I've been working on for about 20 years. It's a sports story about these Black kids who play hockey and won a big championship. It's a true story, and the Farley brothers are producing it, and I'm producing it along with them. And that's what's keeping me busy today, trying to level up. But like Numa said earlier, you know, at one point it was a $30 million budget, now it's down to $8 million. But you know, you're always moving, and it's never enough money. It's never enough money, you know.
It would never be enough, no matter what. So yeah. you want bigger toys. When you get the bigger budget, then they want to double your crew, double the team, pay more for a star. You end up with you're still working with $60,000. No matter what, you're working with 60 grand.
60 grand all over again.
No matter what.
That's a, go ahead, Seckeita, go ahead.
Oh, just one other add to what Joe said. He just, you know, made me remember is always get that backup of it. Because often, like, you may be sending off a set to your editor or sending out, but make sure that you have a backup of all those scenes that you take home with you. I've heard so many horror stories of people not having a copy of their film, like they lost their
double hard drives.
Have those two hard drives there.
It's such a big piece of the budget going in. That you're so right, Seckeita.
Yes,
but having that double hard drive and your designated person that's transferring everything to each drive at the end of each day or throughout the day, and keep those two drives in two different places. One is on your person or around your neck, and the other one is with your most trusted individual on the team. That is huge. I mean, I think you're so right, Seckeita. Spend the money for the double drives and the best drive. Don't go getting no cheap drive.
G-Raid. I'm a big G-Raid fan.
G-Raid, yes.
Top of the line drive, not one of those ones that's going to tucker out on you or be glitchy in any way because it's going to save you, you know, a few $100s.
Yeah.
That is all fantastic advice. And I love what you said, Numa, and what everyone else echoed, that no matter what the budget is, you're making a $60,000 movie. And that's why I love the indie hustle and the indie mindset. So congratulations to the four of you on making your projects and on your next project. Thank you so much for joining us today, Joe, Josh, Seckeita, Numa. I'm sure I'll see all of your beautiful faces again, and I'll be working with all of you sometime in the near future, hopefully. And thank you very much for everyone for joining the 11th Annual Creative Conference. As I mentioned at the top of this program, my podcast is Film Bug. It's available on all podcast platforms. It's also on filmbugpodcast.com. Many thanks to the Atlanta Film Society and the Atlanta Creative Conference for this opportunity. And special thanks to Linda Burns and our tech guru who was on earlier, Emma Warner. So thank you again, guys, and see you soon.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Good to see
you,
all
guys.
of you. Hey, Joe. Hey, Seckeita. Nice to meet you, Josh. Love you, Martine.
Thank you.
Bye.
Nice to meet everybody. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.